Please welcome back to the table, Michael Kammes.
All right, so I'm Michael Kammes. I'm the blowhard that sits up here every month and acts like he knows everything. One of the passions I have in life is educating the industry. I love being able to talk about technology and show people what's new out there. And several years ago, I kind of took a step back and said, you know, there's this rat race of, you know, what's Premiere going to release? What's Apple going to release? What's Ava going to release? And it just gets to be repetitive. And so I started looking at the landscape as what's new? I'm not going to use the term disruptive, but what's different? What could shake things up? And cloud, we're using in every single other facet of our lives. Why don't we use it in post? Right? There are a couple things we use. Another Michael here uses some cloud software. A lot of us are using components, whether it be Frame.io, whether it be FTP, and yes, I know some of you out there are still using FTP. But for a majority of the technology we use, which is creative editorial, we don't do that. We're tethered to the same machine we've had on our desk. If you think about it, the only real commonality in filmmaking for the past 100+ years is that you're always using gear that's on your desk. If you think about it, the Moviola was right there, your computer, your first computer that did video editing was on your desk, and now so is your iMac, right? So I found some technology that I think can shake things up, but there's some underlying knowledge you need to have. And so I put together a presentation to kind of go over what the realities of what cloud is for us creatives when we're not IT people. Sound good? Cool? All right. So is post-production ready for the cloud? One thing I want all of you to do right now, I want you all to take a deep breath. Exhale. Okay. Now, invariably, whenever I do a presentation on the cloud, you get someone in the audience who has glasses, probably bigger than mine, and they push them up and they're just ready to fight. They're ready to rumble. They're ready to find that one thing that's going to say, no, your opinion is wrong. And my response is, what works for one person doesn't work for everyone, right? Some of you use Avid, some of you, well, not many of you use Avid, but some of you use Avid, some of you use Final Cut 10, some of you use Premiere, right? So if the basic essence of our editorial lives, we can't make up our damn minds, I can't rightly think you're going to make, everyone's going to be on the same page with cloud. So I want you to take a look at what I'm going over today with an open mind. So all of you have worked with these tools, right? We've got Microsoft Remote Desktop on the top left, we've got Apple Remote Desktop on the right, and then we've got TeamViewer, which all of you are using for non-commercial use, right? Right? Okay. All of these are great, A, because they're free for non-commercial use, but when we start to use these, we realize very quick that they're garbage. They are garbage. In fact, they're so bad they're dumpster fires. And why is that? That's because these tools are meant for IT professionals. They're meant when you need to log in and shut down someone's computer. They're meant for when you need to install updates remotely. They're not optimized for what we do in a dark room all day, which sounds really bad, but I think you know what I mean. Those tools are not optimized for video. So it means if we're going to use a computer remotely, we have to have a better connection, a better software option. And so dovetailing from that are the 4 things, not 5 because I wanted to be different, 4 things that we need to cover in order to understand how the cloud works for us. First is computers, right? A big fallacy is computers in the cloud are meant for us. They're not fast enough. They're just not what I'm used to. And you may be right to some extent, which I'll get over or cover. Second one is bandwidth. Internet speeds are too slow for editing video. If my Netflix buffers, how the hell can I play video? Okay, that's valid. Next is latency. I know it's a real techie word, but basically the concept of computers being far away from you means there's lag. You hit a button and it takes a while for that computer to respond. We'll cover that too. And of course, cost, which I know drives most of our purchases. So I'll cover that too. So first, how many computers do most of you use? Usually 1, maybe 2, right? 2, all right? Sir, what? You can use this finger. You don't have to do this. Just, okay. So 1 computer, 2 computers, right? This is the methodology most of us are accustomed to, right? You know what that guy's doing right now? He's waiting for a render. because he has one computer. And when you have one computer and you have to do a render, what do? You render too, right? Or you get lunch, right? Or there used to be that program you could download that would put a window up on your computer during render saying, I went and got coffee, right? But when you have one machine, you're doing the render while the computer does the render. That's garbage. That's hot garbage. Because when you start moving to the cloud, you have an almost infant. Yes, you're working with infant computers. They're Mac Minis. No, you almost have an infinite number of computers because you're talking to a data center, right? Everyone here knows what a data center is, right? Big warehouse with a lot of computers, and all they do is chomp through data all day, right? So these computers in the cloud, you have access to multiple systems, and in fact, most of these systems are faster than your local system. This is what I like to call parallel creation. Imagine you start a render on a machine and it says it's going to take 20 minutes. Well, you can either go get lunch or go get coffee, but what about disconnecting from that workstation and connecting to another and starting to edit? And maybe that's an After Effects comp, and maybe you have to render that After Effects comp. Then you can disconnect from that and then launch another. You're now running multiple computers at the same time using the same media without being handcuffed to one machine. Does that sound pretty cool? Does that sound interesting to people? Yeah? Okay. You can't get your coffee, right? You got to get that Keurig on your desk, right? So, now, if any of you, who here has looked into cloud computing at all? Anyone? All right, so if I throw out terms like G34 extra large, you know what that is, right? No? Okay. When you go to different data centers, they all have different designations for computers. They have stuff for general computing, which is really low-powered stuff. If you're familiar with i3s, you know, they have those kind of processors. Then we have ones that are more meant for graphics work. These are your, would be on par with i7s and i9s, and they have a ton of RAM, and they've got a great graphics card. I did an analysis of a base level system in Amazon up in San Jose and compared that to a mid-range iMac Pro and an HP Z8, which is the PC workstation. And my results showed that the systems that we're using in the cloud are 1.3 times faster. And if we decide to add more cores, because all you do is click a button, you get more cores, it can go even faster. The GPU is 4 times faster. Why? Because most instances for video editing have a 16 gig graphics card. How many of you have 16 gig graphics cards? You do? How many do you have? You have 2? Okay, I'll give you that. That's good. But when you spin it up in AWS, you can select multiple GPUs, including 16 gig ones, right? Most folks have graphics cards around 4 gig, right? So that's kind of where this number comes from. Obviously, with the processor and GPU, we can render up about 4 times faster. And here's another cool thing. If you export a finished ProRes master, right, at your local machine, you then have to use your home internet to upload that. That sucks. But if you're doing all this in the cloud, you're using the bandwidth at the data center. So that 4 or 5 hour upload from your local, from your house, becomes a 20-minute transfer data center to data center, right? So there's other benefits of using these remote systems. And just so you know I'm not lying, here's a snapshot. If you have good eyes, you can see on the right-hand side, oh, that's just 122 gigs of RAM. Oh, that's just a 16-core, I can't read the processor number, but that processor is less than 18 months old. If you look on the left-hand side, yeah, that's a Tesla M60. It's a 16 gig GPU. This machine can edit video no problem, and we can spin this up for a couple bucks an hour. There is one downside, though. No Apple. You can put down the torches now. This is not something that Amazon or Microsoft or Google have anything to say. It's Apple, right? This is one reason why you can't legally build a Hackintosh or sell a Hackintosh. Apple doesn't allow virtualization of their OS. So as much as we would like to, you can't. So if you have to use an Apple, if you have to use Apple, you're kind of screwed. But if you look at Premiere or Avid or any of the other, or even Resolve, they look pretty much the same from one platform to another, right? So it's not completely foreign. Now let's talk about latency. Does anyone have any questions on the computer portion? No? Golden? All right. Latency. So this is an ugly way of describing latency. On the left-hand side is a computer. On the right-hand side looks like a server. For shits and grins, let's say it's on another planet. The reason I'm saying that is look at that latency at the bottom, right? Latency is how long it takes to send a command and then see the results of that command. So it's 800 milliseconds to the computer, 800 milliseconds to the server on the right, 900 back. We call that latency of 1.7 seconds. That's horrible. You'll never see anything like that in the video editing realm. This is just as an example. So, latency is the first question I always get. Well, you can't edit remotely. There's too much latency. I say, okay. And I say, well, what is latency to you? Well, you know, 1/10 of a second. Okay, smartass. If you look at these statistics right here, the average human, their perception, their speed, is about 2/10 of a second. 1/10 of a second is considered instantaneous. We're talking Formula One racers. We're talking astronauts, folks that have incredible hand-eye coordination. That's at 100 milliseconds. Each of us is about 215 milliseconds. All right? So, computer screens. This computer screen here, your desktop computer screen, adds 10 to 20 milliseconds. You're trying to play 4K on an HD monitor or trying to play HD on a 4K monitor? Well, guess what? That monitor has to scale it. Every time it does processing to scale stuff, it adds latency, 10 to 90 milliseconds. Hell, online gaming is 20 to 50 milliseconds. So when we talk about latency, keep in mind that all of these are pretty slight compared to the concept of human perception. Did all of you hear about Stadia that launched 2 weeks ago? Google's online gaming platform, right? They're recommending 25 to 50 milliseconds, and the day they premiered it, they were getting 80 milliseconds, right? So it's not great. All of you familiar with 5G that's coming out, right? Sometime later on this year, it's the replacement for 4G. That's supposed to have even lower latency, and they're actually provisioning 60 to 100 times faster or lower latency than 4G. Now, what does all this latency mean? Well, as I mentioned, the further you are from where the computer is or from where the data is, the higher your latency is, right? Here's a good example. If I pulled out one of my laser pointers, you know, the ones you're not supposed to use near airports, right? And you shine that to LA, and then in LA, they shine it back. That's gonna take 26 milliseconds. Right? Our network here in the United States, if I were to do the same thing on our network, it's about 66 milliseconds, right? So we're still way under the limits of human perception. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So here's LA. All those colored dots, those are data centers. Those are AWS, those are Amazon, that's Microsoft. And see that red circle? That's us. So if you're sitting within that red circle and you're connecting to a data center that's within 15, 20 miles, your latency is going to be pretty good. If you look at the bottom left, I took this latency test last night, 11 milliseconds. So when people tell you, oh, when you edit in the cloud, there's too much latency, well, first off, get off your hotspot, right? Stop using your 4G, stop using Wi-Fi that everyone else is on, get a hardwired connection or dedicated Wi-Fi. And you'll have no problem. So don't let the whole there's too much latency be a disclaimer for cloud workflows. Okay, who here knows Vice? Right? Okay. I know I could sit up here, because I am, and lecture you about how well these machines work. But I happen to talk with Brian Glover, who's the director of media engineering at Vice Media, and I've got a quick soundbite from him I think you may find interesting.
And just from my initial experience with just touching a VBonk workstation, the first thing that immediately jumped out to me was just the responsiveness. You know, I'm demoing on my tiny 11-inch MacBook. I'm controlling a workstation in the cloud that is, to be completely honest, better spec than anything we have on-prem. And it feels like I'm sitting in front of that workstation. You know, audio and video are tightly in sync with one another. Keyboard commands are committed in a prompt manner, and it feels very organic. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it is genuinely hard to tell the difference when you really get into the zone and you're really, you know, cutting and moving and shaking.
I didn't pay him to say that. That's completely valid. Yes?
So he was using a Mac, so you can use a Mac to get there, but not a Mac.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So Brian, Vice has been using this. They have an editor in Philadelphia, but they're based, I believe, in the Bronx, out in New York, and they simply don't want that person to come in. He wants to stay at home, work with his kids. Great, set him up and he can work remote. In fact, who here remembers the Pepsi Challenge? All right, that shows the old folks from the young folks. We actually like to do that. The company I'm working for now, we actually like to do that, which is park this system in front of someone and say, okay, is this live or is it Memorex? And they tell us whether they think it's local or not. So that's how good it is. Okay, bandwidth. Bandwidth, my Irish friends in the audience will get that. Okay, so bandwidth. Bandwidth are the pipes, the series of interconnected tubes that keep the internet together. That's how fast your internet bandwidth is at home or at work. Right now, the United States is not so good. There are countries that dwarf our throughput. And if we take Google Fiber or Fios or any of those other high performance providers out, the average bandwidth in the United States, aggregated over the entire continental US, is 96 megabits download and 39 megabits upload, right? You always get more bandwidth to download than you do upload. That's not great. I can't fight physics, that's what it is. I will say that it's a 30% increase over 2017, right? So we are making progress. What does that mean for media? Well, if any of you guys are math whizzes, you'll know that if you're trying to take 10 terabytes worth of data and upload, let me phrase that differently. If you want to do upload, let's say 20 hours of DNX36, our bandwidth here in the US is about real time with that. So it's going to take you 20 hours to upload 20 hours of media. That's not good, especially when you have multiple cameras or you're shooting fat codecs, right? DNX36 is proxy. ProRes LT is proxy. H.264, that's proxy. I'm not here to lie to you and tell you that I have a solution for this. I don't. But what I can tell you is that how many of you have to ship drives or get drives from the DIT or on set, right? That takes days, or if it's overnighted, that costs hundreds of dollars, right? So that shipping time can be put forward or put towards uploading. So there is some trade-off there. I talked a little bit earlier about 5G, right? Now 5G, if you look on the right-hand side here, because 5G hasn't been deployed throughout the entire country yet, there's only a few test cases, we're looking at 61 megabits upload or 418 megabits upload, depending on minimum and maximum. So in another year or so, you'll be, if you over 5G, you'll be able to upload a hell of a lot more than ProRes proxy or DNX in real time. You can upload fat files. I don't know about those R3D files you were talking about earlier. Those may be kind of bigger, but some other files you'll be able to upload no problem. This is the other thing I want to point out when it comes to time. Remember I showed you the speed performance, the 1.3 times faster and 4 times GPU. Once you add all those in, when you have a faster machine, stuff happens faster. You render faster, you export faster, you can deliver faster. So there's all these things in post that a virtual machine in a data center can handle, or that can do to make up for that lost time for uploading, right? So while I don't have a silver bullet to remedy the uploads today, there are other reasons to use cloud computing that counteract some of that upload speeds. Okay, now we're at cost. Is everyone with me so far? Yep, cool. All right, so cost. This is what everyone is always curious about. First of all, they lecture me on how it won't work, and then they want to know how much it costs. I always get a kick out of that. It's like they want to debate me on multiple levels, which is great, you know. It's like arguing with a pig. You know, pigs like to roll in mud, you know. Okay, so this is an average. Most computers have a 3 to 5 year shelf life. I was waiting for some laughter because I know some of you are still rocking G5s. I was really waiting for that. But 3 to 5 years is what most businesses construe as a life cycle of a computer. Also, a workstation, I'm not talking about those MacBook Airs you swear can do uncompressed. I'm talking about workstations, right? Workstations, whether it be a brand new old 2013 Mac Pro or a brand new overpriced HP Z8, those machines can run anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000. So the average for a workstation is about $7,000, right? Are we all in agreement on that? That sounds kind of average to everyone? Good, because I pulled it out of my ass. But no, I'm kidding. I actually did crunch some numbers. So when you're handcuffed to one machine, you're paying $7,000 for that machine, right? You're paying that all at once. which some people like. Some people like with what they call CapEx model, where they buy it and they just own it. Some people prefer the OpEx, where they're paying for it monthly. If you pay for it all at once, you have to have $7,000 ready at the drop of a hat. If you put it in some kind of payment plan, that comes out to $145 a month. That's not cheap. And after 3 to 5 years, you're stuck. You've got that one machine, that G5 I mentioned a little while ago, you still have got that, right? However, if we move to the cloud, did you know that data centers upgrade their hardware without you asking for it? Every year and a half or so, hey, look, new computer, new processor, new RAM, new GPU. You don't have to pay for that. That's rolled into the cost. $145 a month, that'll get you 26 hours of cloud usage of a baller machine. There's no computer commitment, meaning if you decide after a week or so you don't want to use the computer anymore, cool, done. Just don't spin it up, don't pay for it anymore. There's no commitment. Now, the one thing I will preface this is, the one thing that costs a ton right now in the cloud is storage. And I'm not talking about the Glacier stuff you use or the S3. That stuff is slow because you're uploading from your home connection, right? Which is only a few dozen megabits a second. When you start trying to get cloud storage to edit video off of, the price skyrockets because the data centers, their storage is not meant to do that. So you have to provision higher performance storage to handle that, and that costs a lot more per month. It can go anywhere from $130 per terabyte, which is the kind of low end, up to $2,000 for folks who want to do, 10-bit 8K HDR, right? So it all depends on what kind of footage you're working with, which is why a lot of people in the cloud or who use cloud for editing will do proxy workflows because it's quick to upload. You don't have to have a super machine to cut it. You don't have to have a ton of storage, and then you can just download the project file and relink to the high res, right? So I have a few minutes left. I'm going to show you this working. Cool? Yeah? Okay. So this is the company that I'm currently working with called Bebop Technology. Bebop Technology is a startup that specializes in creative applications in data centers around the world. We geolocate the one next to you. We build the VM to your specifications for the apps you want to use. We find out what codecs and workflows you're using, provision the right storage, and then we give it to you. And you just create all day long. So right now, I have 6 workstations because I asked for them. So I have some that are great for VFX, because if you think about it, VFX, that's not a lot of bandwidth to play back. You're changing your view, you're adding a keyframe. It's not fat bandwidth. You're not playing 4K ProRes files. So I have some desktops here which are provisioned for VFX. I then have one which is already running, because I wanted to do this fast for you, I use for VFX and video editing. This one here has Premiere on it, and Resolve, and Blender, and a couple other things on here. That looks like Premiere, doesn't it? Yeah? Okay. Everyone knows what this green dot is right here, right? Yep. Right? If that's green, well, A, it means the trap is clean, but it also means no one got that. You all make me sick. You got it? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a very big Twinkie. Yeah, the light is green, the trap is clean, but green means you're not dropping any frames, right? So that's kind of like, that's the indicator saying, hey, this machine can handle it. So in my timeline right here, I happen to have the 4K material. You know how I know it's 4K? Because I've got my browser here, which tells me it's UHD ProRes. This isn't 264. This isn't some kind of scaled down proxy. This is full res. Until the next episode, learn more, do more. Thanks for watching. During testing, I was alerted to the fact that the Mini will throttle the chip speed when the unit hits. What I'm saying isn't important. What is important is, did anyone catch any drop frames? No. So, let me recap that for a second. I played 4K from a data center inside Premiere to my laptop on shitty Wi-Fi in here. So if anyone tells you that cloud editing isn't possible, they just don't want to get out of the hardware game and they're making money somehow.
Can you scrub it, Michael?
Sure. In fact, that's my JKL. If you want me to scrub, sure. Anyone that's used Premiere knows full well the playhead drags behind the mouse.
Can you trim it?
Sure. What do you want to do? Let's blade it. Let's do an A. There we go. There we go. Let's then delete that.
Until the next episode, look speed when the unit hits about 100 degrees. So if it pushes it too hard, the performance that kind of low.